You mentioned the Titanic and the Lusitania, etc. More, please.
Titanic was another 9/11. Lusitania was another Tonkin Bay. Lusitania was sunk by an American submarine so the US could have an excuse to enter First World War. Like the attack on a US destroyer off the coast of Vietnam never happened. It was only an excuse.
Yes, I understand and agree.
At least it never happened the way they said it has. So Lusitania here is quite clear as an excuse. In this case, we must mention Pearl Harbor as well. As the US, Roosevelt and Department of the Navy knew about the attack and chose to do nothing as well.
Yes, this is so, just as the elimination of Sir Isaac Gary was to prevent UFO disclosure, and I suspect the Kennedy assassination.
Kennedy UFOs, yes, but not only UFOs. He wanted to tell everyone about the secret societies ruling the US. Eisenhower wanted that as well. It looks like Kennedy didn't know what he was up against.
If he had, it might have scared him to death. I was most distressed to learn how rudely Eisenhower treated Rochelle.
He did not understand what he was up against.
It's a shame. I think he would have been very helpful even though he was embroiled in the lower parts.
And why was Kennedy assassinated? It's more like why wasn't he assassinated earlier, as the reasons too are many, and his enemies as well.
He did have some protection, but alas.
Not enough. The very Secret Service was infiltrated and, in fact, also shot at him. It's documented.
I have never trusted the SS, just another name for the SS from Germany, an extension, if you will.
It is the same. It is exactly the same, as SS does not stand for Secret Service only. It stands for Schwarze Sonne in German, Black Sun or Saturn worshippers. Saturn, Satan. That's why the Nazis had black suits. That's why the Secret Service wears black. They are the priesthood of the Order of the Black Sun. They are loyal to their Saturn-worshipping overlords, not to the President of the United States.
Fortunately, I am somewhat informed of these things. Now, I want to know, please, of something that perhaps I do not know. Perhaps explain Titanic. Was this a military move and the ship was sunk or on purpose, as I suspect?
Okay, Titanic. The owners of the Titanic were, among others, the Rothschild and the Rockefeller, who owned the White Star Line. They wanted to implement the Federal Reserve, but powerful people opposed them. People who they could lure on a ship and sink it, get them out of the way. So some years before the first ship of the line, the Olympic, crashed with another ship, a Royal Navy battleship, the Olympic was damaged, and badly. Her keel was bent. Exaggerating, she was no longer like an arrow, she was like a banana. She sailed with an ugly list to port. She was not insured. So the White Star Line had to pay the Royal Navy so much money because it was the Olympics fought during the crash right outside Southampton. This just about left the White Star Line in bankruptcy, as they were also going through a bad coal strike that was affecting business badly. The captain of the Olympic at the time of the crash, and the one who caused the crash, was no one other than good old Captain Smith. So they had a bankrupted White Star Line and a crashed expensive liner that would cost more to repair than to build, and two others in the docks being built, the Titanic and the Britannic. So they executed a master plan to replace everything in the Titanic and place it in the Olympic, who was still very new at the time, like 1 year and a bit of service. All they had to do was replace their names, some details on the superstructure, lifeboats, and internal things with names like the cutlery. The Olympic became the Titanic and vice versa. They made a media story, a lot of propaganda about the ship. Unsinkable she was. This to tell everyone what she really was, sinkable. You know those psychopaths. They always tell you what they are going to do for karmic reasons. So, as that was the event of the year, every rich and powerful person wanted to be in the party. Titanic's maiden voyage. Of course, people like the infamous J.P. Morgan, co-owner of the White Star Line, got off the ship minutes before she set sail. The silly Monopoly game man J.P. Morgan was not only in on this, he was one of the masterminds. The survivors of the Titanic do say she had an inexplicable and ugly list to port as she sailed. Notice how the Titanic sank very stable until the last minutes when she broke apart. She did not capsize. The Britannic, her sister ship, sustained similar damage on the same side as the Titanic, and she capsized minutes after hitting the mines during World War I. And all the computerized and large-scale model sinking in staged pools indicate that a ship like the Titanic and her sisters always capsized when they took water in from a gash or hole on her starboard bow side. When the ship got to a specific location in the navigation maps, she was to stage a rubbing against the first piece of ice she found. There, they had another ship waiting, the Californian, another ship owned by J.P. Morgan and henchmen. During that ugly coal strike, it was difficult to get enough of it for a ship to be able to make a crossing Southampton, New York, or anywhere. But this large line, the Californian, was just sitting there with her engines on, burning coal, and she had nothing on board but a cargo of blankets and sweaters. Doesn't this strike you as strange enough? They were to rescue some of the survivors of the Titanic, not all. The iceberg did not sink the Titanic. She was big and strong. Even though the metal was cold and brittle, it was not enough. She rubbed the side of the iceberg. Chunks of ice fell on the decks. Many played with them, the accounts say. But immediately after this premeditated event, Captain Smith ordered the ballast keel valves to open. These valves are designed to let water into the ship to make her heavy when in rough sea, for example. The pumps would take the water out if needed to lighten the ship, also as needed. That's why the ship sank so evenly and did not capsize until well into the sinking. because she was flooding from the center of the keel. Perfectly uniform flooding. The iceberg is innocent. Then, a number of things didn't go according to plan. Nothing ever does. But in the end, they got what they wanted. More than 1,500 people died unnecessarily that night. Other important first-class guests, like the Strauss couple that were opposing the Federal Reserve, were shot in their cabins with a .38 cal revolver to ensure that they did not survive the incident and did not get into a lifeboat. In 1985, Robert Ballard had a well-founded search for the Titanic that led to her discovery, and that in itself was not what you were told it was. He was not there to look for the Titanic. He was being founded by the US Navy to look for the remains of two lost submarines, the Thresher and the Scorpion, lost in that same general area of the North Atlantic. And he was told that he had to find the submarines first, and if he had remaining time, he could use it to search for the Titanic. It was also a cover-up, because the Soviets were also looking for those submarines. The US Navy needed a cover story to get to them first.
Do you remember the sunken submarine named USS Thresher? Well, it didn't sink. It was taken away by the Federation. And the USS Scorpion, well, it didn't sink either. Not exactly. It crashed in the caverns under California on its way to its base in Area 51. Robert Ballard, the one who supposedly found the Titanic, the US Navy paid him and made a deal. He was supposed to go out and look for the USS Thresher and find it and take pictures of garbage and junk on the bottom of the sea, and say that's what's left of the Thresher. In exchange for that, the US Navy would give him exclusivity on having found the Titanic that the military had previously found decades before, and they had already investigated everything to do with that sinking and had removed the radioactive material that was in its interiors.
Radioactive material from where?
The Titanic was carrying radioactive material from Novaya Zemlya, Russia to New York, but it was lost in the accident.
So the Titanic was sunk as another 9/11 to get away with an agenda, to claim insurance for the Titanic, money again, and to implement the Federal Reserve because it no longer had people who opposed it with voting. And with the Titanic, the United States died as it forfeited its freedom. 1775 to 1913. Rest in peace. Later on, movie producer and director James Cameron went down in advanced submersibles and took thousands of photographs of the wreck. Cameron wanted to find the most important piece to photograph, the ship's name in the wrecked hull Titanic Liverpool. He did not find it. What he found was some telltale letters that were covered with a plaque. It read TITIMPIC.
Oh my! I'm blown away. This is most amazing story. Thank you so much for the clarification. It all makes perfect sense, as terrible as it was and is. So sorry to make you type so much.
You're welcome.
Was this publicly known? Or is it publicly known?
Not to this level of detail. There are many people starting to be aware of this, And there are YouTube videos debunking this what I just said. This is not my theory. It just happens to be what I believe happened, with the best information we have here. And we are as well informed as it gets. It's our job to be. A chunk of ice sinking that 85,000-ton ship? No, I don't think so.